All right, so I actually ran into this question off and on from different people. And there's a lot of factors that go into making sure that the mechanics of this work correctly. So the first thing we'll start off with is how to identify the user and get the user ID for the currently logged in user, right? That's the first challenge. All right. So in the partials video, I kind of covered that, but it may have not been clear because that was kind of a video out of series of this. I actually pulled a video from a prior term to show that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to implement that to give you an understanding of how you pull up the user ID. So I'm going to go into my account controller. And what I'm going to do is create a partial called user info. And I'm not going to take in any parameters. This will be a child action, so it'll be a partial. And I'll return partial view. And then do I have a model? User manager, view model, what's a user manager? I can use my user manager view model. All right, so this will be my 3 steps. Create an instance of the view model object that I want to populate with the user data, populate that object, and then return it to, or send it to the partial view for it to be rendered. All right, so populate user view model is probably oversimplified. We need to build a DB context. We need to query users to find this user, capture the user DTO, and then pump it into the user VM. Okay, so really it's more like 4 steps. So building building that context or instantiating that context, we've been doing that for a few weeks now. So I'm going to do using project DB context, context equals new project context. So I do that whole thing with the curly brackets and the using statement. I'm just creating that context. Now this is the magic part of it, is how do I figure out who the user is that's logged in? That user exists inside of user.identity.name. And how did that get there? Well, if you think back to the global ASAX from when we did the authentication. Oh, not there. Not there. We went to the login, account controller, same spot. So under the account controller and the login postback, we did this fancy little piece here where we said forms authentication, get cookie. And we passed in the username and told it false, not to persist it. That method, besides giving us a cookie, actually creates the cookie. And in that cookie is stored the username of the user who is logged in. All right? So in the user's browser, there's a cookie, and in that cookie, encrypted, is the username. Then every time a new page request comes, that cookie gets decrypted, and that string value of the username gets stored inside of identity.user.name. Okay? So because it's always there, as long as the user's logged in, we can retrieve it from there and then use that as our lookup value. So I'm just going to store it in a local variable called username. That's kind of redundant. You don't have to. But if you wanted to, then you can do context.users.where, or better yet, first or default. Now, X, remember, X represents one row out of the user's table. So the idea here is you're saying X is a row, and if we want, let's actually clarify that. Let's call it row. All right, it's just a variable name, so we'll call it row. So we're saying first your default where the row, which is a user, username equals username. Now that seems ambiguous, so I'm actually going to get rid of this. I'm going to do it this way: user.identity.name. So hopefully that's even clearer. So what we're doing is we're looking at that row of data from the database, and we're saying where the row value of username equals that user.identity.name coming from ASP.NET. Yeah.
You scroll up just a tad bit, just 2 lines up.
Scroll up.
Yes, please.
Okay. Is that good? Okay. So what this is doing is it's saying, is there a row in the database where that username from my logged in user from that cookie matches the row in the database itself? And then what we want to do is we want to capture that inside of logged in user. I'm actually going to take logged in user, the variable declaration, I'm going to move it up here outside of the context, or outside of the using statement, because I want that variable to persist when I get all the way down here. All right, does that make some sense how the mechanics are working there? We're getting that username out of the user identity, out of the cookie, if you want to think of it that way, and then we're saying find the row in the database where that username matches what's in the cookie. And give us back that user. So you've got a 50-50 shot here. Basically, somehow either the user is successfully logged in, you get back the user DTO, and you go on with life, or somehow somebody hacked your system well enough to shove another value into the cookie, and then you can't find the user. Or the user's logged in, and then in the process, somebody deleted that user as an admin, and now that user's kind of hanging out in limbo. So logged in user should be your user DTO. Then we want to pump that value into the user VM. And that's simply a matter of going user VM dot email address equals logged in user dot email address, user VM dot first name equals logged in user dot first name. You get the idea. Okay? So I've now copied all the values from the DTO, from the database, into that view model, and then I send it up as a partial view. Now I don't have a partial right now, so I'm going to right-click here and say Add View. I'm going to create a partial, and I'll do it as empty. And say I'm using the user manager view model as my model class, and hit add. So it will spin and do all that work just to give me one line of code and an empty text page. Text icon. So from here we can do some basic mechanics. Now there's actually two things that we could do from here, and both would be perfectly valid. You've probably seen on some websites where they basically just spit out the username onto the screen. In theory, we have access to that same user.identity.name right here. So without any other work, I didn't even have to write all that controller action code that I did. I could have just said return partial view with no parameter, and then come to this page and said output user.identity.name, and it would spit out the username on the page. Okay? But our model for this view is that view model that we just populated. So it has email address, it has first name, last name, ID number, username. All of those values are in our model that's attached to this view. So we can be fancy about it, and we can say model.firstName, model.lastName, model.emailaddress. So what that's going to do instead is it'll output first name, last name, and then parentheses it'll put the username and the link. The username will become a link that links to the email address. Jazz it up a little more, put some bold tags around it, make it fancy, whatever. Now that link doesn't have to link to the email address. It could link to the manage account page. It could link to a number of different things. Then the last thing we could do here is we can say ahref url.action. I believe the method is named logout. So the name of the action is logout. The controller is the account controller. And then I'm just going to add a class, some styling to this. And then we'll have a little sign out button there. Okay? So that'll look nice. So first of all, does everything I did make sense? I know I'm kind of flying. I'm not intending to. But hopefully this isn't anything new, and especially since you've spent a couple weeks building some code, most of it should look somewhat familiar to you now. All right? Now, this is great. All right. Put my own phone on vibrate. Is it raining?
Yeah, it's a little wet out there.
Jeez. All right. So if I take this partial and I put it in my site, what problem do I have by doing that? Anybody have an idea?
You do what?
If I take this partial and I add it to my site. So if I go into, so I'm going to take this, I'm going to stick it in my view. I'm going to go shared layout. I'm going to replace this, right? That's my sign out. If you notice there, I did the user.identity.name. And I'm going to instead put HTML.action. I'm going to call user information. There should be an overload, comma, account. Okay, so I'm pulling that partial into my layout. Right, no parameters, I'm not passing anything to it, I'm just doing straight user information action off the account controller. It infers it from user.identity.name. It figures out how to render that out. Now I just may have made a liar of myself, but we'll see. So now if I run this app, my gut tells me that this should break. And it did. If for What is happening? Here's. Oh. As I was answering questions for people, I was tinkering with my code, trying to figure out what they were doing. No, grind it up. All right. Oh, it didn't break. Even better. Okay. So what I had in my head was, if I don't check for authentication, and I put that partial in there, then if the user isn't logged in, the code will break. No, so that was in my head, that's what I assumed, because I was just assuming that the person was logged in. But because that partial is wrapped inside of an if statement, inside of the layout, flip back here, I'll show you. So my layout, CS_HTML, I have this if request is authenticated, and then I did a not, there's an exclamation mark there. So if the user is not authenticated, show the sign in. Else, render that action. This is saving me for myself. So let's assume that we wanted to get rid of the if block and just use the one partial, right? Less code, less chance of having to go back and maintain more things. So we drop the if block. Actually, I'm going to keep this little if statement because it'll be useful. Refresh, and now it'll blow up. Yay. Okay. So the reasoning is that it tries to go out and grab logged in user. I said first or default. Well, the default is null. So the logged in user is coming back as null because there is no user with the name of blank string. So if I flip back to my code, I'll show you. I'm going to put a breakpoint right, not on that. We'll just put a breakpoint right here and we'll start our way down the chain. So let me attach my debugger. Reload the page. All right, so set up a view model, nothing fancy. Step over. Set up my context, nothing fancy, step over. So now, user is a generic principal, identity is a generic identity. Those both come out of the system.security namespace within the .NET framework, if you're curious. Name is an empty string. Why? Because we're not logged in. So this statement is saying find the user in the database whose name is an empty string. We don't have one. So the logged in user comes back as null. So what has to happen here is we need to then put an if statement surrounding that, checking to make sure that we got a user back. So if logged in user does not equal null, do all of that. I'm going to make two more adjustments. I'm going to take this instantiation, I'm going to cut it. I'm going to move it here. Because I don't want to actually create an instance of that user VM if I don't have a user to copy, right? Why create an object in memory and then not do anything with it? It's wasteful. I still need that variable. Oops. Too close. Alright, so now what I have is I'm declaring a variable and I'm setting it equal to null. So basically I said, make me a variable, I need this amount of space for it, but don't put anything in it. Just create a box with a name on it. Set it equal to null. As I go through, I'll make my way through here, I'll do my logged in user. If there's a user, well, if there is a user, create an instance of the user, manager view model, populate it, send it on its way. If not, my user VM will be null. Then on this side of the boat, on my view, I'll say if model is null, else so if the model is null, show sign in. Else, show the log out. So I do a rebuild. Wow. Reload. I feel like I may get another error. We'll see.
Oh, it was unexpected.
Expected curly bracket. Those match. Those match. Those match.
Your quotes look funny.
Yeah. My quotes look funny.
The next line.
This line?
Yeah, is that right?
No, it's actually up here because if you notice, it stopped colorizing my HTML. Like this A should be red, and the angle bracket should be blue. It actually stopped here. It stopped here. So let's do this. Cut, save, refresh. Okay, so that showed up. I'm happy with that. So we'll do that. Cut, save, refresh. Valid expression term. Oh, I see it. That's funny. I shouldn't catch that. It thinks that that angle bracket is part of my C#. I believe. Cut, save, refresh. Nope.
Why does it just get rid of the brackets for the head?
For the A?
Yeah, like, does that clear the error?
It's gonna spit a string out on the screen, but I think it's the mail too. I don't think it knows what to do with it. That's my gut. Put that back. Take that out. Keyword identifier or string expected after verbatim specifier. Yeah, that wouldn't be what I want. Let's try it this way.
Why do you have model that last name?
Yeah. Run that symbol.
Why do I have who? What?
Model that last name.
Well, I was trying to isolate it, thinking it was looking at the B tag, the close of the B tag, as C sharp, because it ran together. So I was putting it in parentheses to say this is where that C sharp statement is. It's just in parentheses. And sometimes you have to do that. The parser just gets a little flighty. I think it thinks those parentheses are C sharp. It does. That's weird. Mail to model.email address. Refresh. It's totally okay with that now. It'd be broken. Still be broken. Ooh, I like that.
Is it showing your if statement code?
Huh?
Is it showing your if statement code?
No, I don't think so. Let me.
That's what mine's doing.
No, it's got it all in there. Yours? Did you put your at symbol in front of your if?
Yeah. Just now.
Okay. Alright, so we'll get rid of that. It really makes me upset that it doesn't like that. Those parentheses. Alright, well, stop looking at it. Oh, come on. Well, this isn't worth fighting over. What?
So that's how it is, like when I'm at home trying to do something simple.
Right.
Why isn't this working?
I know the alignment's all off because the name's up there, and the alignment's all off because of the bootstrap. So it's up there, you can see it.
You don't have it in the list item.
Huh?
You don't have it in the list item.
I do have it in the side.
He changed to these stuff.
Yeah, I fixed it.
I'm confused as to, so at first, before you did the code, it was just like the username, but now you had it, what we just did was you put the last name in the notifications bar, or is it not supposed to?
So here's the thing. So the bootstrap, the way that this menu bar is constructed, is it's expecting a list item with a link inside it. Prior, we didn't have the full name in there. It wasn't a link. It was just the username inside of parentheses. Right now, the full name is not part of the link. And that's why it's floating all funny. So to fix it, if I take, well, I can just do this. Just wrap it in an A tag with no link. And that puts it in there. Now why that guy's hanging out on the side like that, I have no idea. He should have bumped right up next to it.
Can I see your layout file?
What?
I think if you put that second anchor tag in another list item, that would make it.
Ah, clever. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Alright, so then we gotta get rid of this.
Because I think it thinks it's since it's an anchor, it's a block of
Okay.
style.
So we gotta bring our li in here. And I just copied over myself. So you're saying do this. I'm switching.
Can we just go over how you type on 2 lines?
How I did what?
Type on 2 lines.
You like that, don't you?
Shift Alt.
Huh?
Shift Alt. You go down one.
Yes. So Alt. So Alt lets you move vertically. Well, Shift. Hang on, Mac keyboard. If you just hold Alt, you can flip your key. You can flip your lines around. If you hold Alt and Shift, you can select vertically. And you can also like. So I want this random block of text.
Can you hold left
Alt
Alt?
would be like a random list of things. Yeah.
You mean Alt and Shift and just do that? Yeah, you can do that. And then if you want to type something, you Alt Shift, you select the lines you want to type in, and then you just type. And it'll type in all of them.
We should go over that.
All right, you want to know more keyboard shortcuts? All right, here we go. Are you good with the layout, or are you still looking at it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like multitasking in my lecture. All right. And this is the stuff I'm going to ask you to do on the final, right? Right, that's what we're going to do. All right. So, let's say I need to grab this line of code. How would you do it?
Mouse and drag.
You grab your mouse and you drag and do all this stuff, right? That takes a long time. It does when you're over here typing, you go, oh, and I gotta grab it. So I do one of two ways. Hold down Shift and Control, or no, I'm sorry. I hold down Shift and I hit the Home key and it'll just highlight the line for me. Didn't have to take my hand off the keyboard. If I want to grab from a certain spot down, I do the same thing, but I hit the End key. Shift End, down. Actually, that's Shift Page down. Shift End goes the other way on the line. So it takes you to the end of the line, beginning of the line. End, home, right? Good stuff. All right. But then you got to use like both hands, and then everybody's getting involved. So instead, you're on a line in Visual Studio, Control X will just cut the line that your cursor's on. No highlighting necessary. And V, paste that line back in.
Wait, still Control X, still Control V, we don't have.
Correct. In Visual Studio, as long as your cursor is on a line, Control X will just cut that entire line out. And then I think I did this one time. I could be, yeah, I'm lying to myself. All right.
Too crazy.
Huh?
You're getting crazy. Calm down.
Sorry. You're too excited about
2 lines at once.
cut and pasting code. All right. You should see me at work. I get like. All right.
What's this word?
This is what?
What's this word?
I enjoy what I do. Everybody at work thinks I'm crazy. All right. So now I'm curious. If I come back and put these parentheses in here, is it going to balk at me? I am not very satisfied with my experience. Thank you, Windows 10. All right. It's doing the block thing. It's not setting it. All right. Screw you, Bootstrap. Every time I go to their website, they announce Bootstrap 4 is coming. So I'm waiting to see what that does and how much of my stuff it brings. I know, right? All right.
I'm still confused as to what we just did. The point of it.
Okay. That is a fair enough thing because I was starting to reflect on what the heck was I just getting at. All right. So what I was doing was a couple of things. The first thing was, how do I figure out who the user is that's currently logged in? Because my goal is to be able to take that user and figure out what sessions they signed up for, okay? So I was doing it through a slightly different example because I don't know if I have all my tables set up, so I was trying to simplify the explanation. Really, this line, or lines here, is the secret sauce. It's using the user.identity.name to find the username of the user that's currently logged in. And then using your DB context, you fetch that user from the database using context.users.firstname or default, and then where the username matches. Right? That part makes sense? All right. So now that we have the user from the database, we can get the ID from that object. So that'll give you your user ID in the database. All right?
Figure out how to add the parentheses.
Huh?
Figure out how to add the parentheses.
You put them in the A tag?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the easier way. I've done it without doing all of that, but then it involves me writing far more CSS than I should. So, but yeah, it's like he said, it's the block issue because when it's up there and it's not inside of an A tag, it treats it as a block of text and then it causes it to fall and do all kinds of weird stuff. All right. So that's a